Natalie Portman, Thor: Love and Thunder. When Marvel brought Natalie Portman back as Jane Foster, fans expected a heartfelt arc, Jane battling cancer while becoming the mighty Thor. It had the potential to be one of the MCU's most emotional storylines. But under Taika Waititi's direction, the film leaned almost entirely into comedy. The constant quips and over-the-top humor clashed with Jane's tragic circumstances, turning what could have been a powerful exploration of love and mortality into awkward tonal whiplash. Portman delivered a professional performance, but the writing gave her little room to shine. Her transformation into Mighty Thor felt more like a studio mandate than an organic evolution of the character. What could have elevated the Thor series instead turned into another example of Marvel's identity-swapping trend, where legacy characters are replaced without meaningful build-up. Fans left disappointed, and the Thor franchise, once revitalized by Ragnarok, slid back into decline. Halle Berry, Catwoman 2004. Catwoman stands as one of the most infamous misfires in superhero cinema. After winning an Oscar for Monsters Ball, Halle Berry was cast in a bold new spin on the DC character. Instead of Selina Kyle, the movie invented a new identity: Patience Phillips, a reimagined Catwoman with mystical powers. Everything from the costume design to the script felt out of touch. The leather outfit was ridiculed as impractical and over-sexualized, while the story replaced Gotham grit with a bizarre cosmetics company conspiracy. Berry, despite her talent, was trapped in material that made her performance look cartoonish. Audiences and critics panned it mercilessly, and the movie became a punchline in comic book culture. To her credit, Berry embraced the failure, even showing up to accept her Razzie Award in person. But the damage was done. For years afterward, DC avoided greenlighting solo female-led projects, fearing another disaster. Today, Catwoman is less remembered as a superhero movie and more as a warning of what happens when studios misunderstand the character at the heart of a franchise. Charlize Theron, Fast and Furious franchise. When Charlize Theron joined the Fast and Furious saga as Cypher, it was supposed to inject new life into the blockbuster juggernaut. Her icy villainy was designed to push Dom and his crew into darker, higher-stakes territory. But in practice, her presence shifted the tone away from the heart of the franchise. Fans came to Fast and Furious for cars, family bonds, and absurd stunts, not for long-winded cyber-terrorism lectures. Theron's detached delivery felt out of sync with the warmth of the ensemble, creating a jarring contrast. The franchise didn't collapse overnight, but Cypher marked the beginning of its slide into fatigue. The focus moved further away from street racing toward generic spy thriller tropes, leaving many longtime fans nostalgic for the days when the series was simpler and more fun. By 2025, even die-hard fans admit the franchise peaked years ago, and Theron's arrival is often cited as the turning point. Kristen Stewart, Charlie's Angels 2019. In 2019, Sony tried to revive Charlie's Angels for a modern audience. Kristen Stewart was placed front and center, aiming to bring indie credibility and star power to the beloved action comedy series. The problem wasn't Stewart's talent. She had proven her range in films like Personal Shopper and Clouds of Sils Maria. The problem was tone. Stewart played her angel with sarcastic detachment, almost as if she was above the material, while the franchise itself had always thrived on campy energy and playful chemistry. Audiences were confused. Was this a parody? A gritty spy thriller? A feminist satire? The movie never settled on an identity. Instead of being fun, it felt awkwardly self-aware. The marketing only made things worse. Trailers emphasized empowerment messaging over escapism, and interviews positioned the film as a cultural test rather than a popcorn blockbuster. By the time the film landed in theaters, the backlash was already baked in. It bombed spectacularly, effectively killing the brand for the foreseeable future. Kristen Stewart walked away with her career intact, but her turn as an angel is remembered as a high-profile experiment that buried a franchise. Brie Larson, the Marvel's MCU. When Marvel Studios announced Brie Larson as Captain Marvel, they weren't just casting a role, they were building the future of the franchise. With Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans exiting after Endgame, Larson was marketed as the new face of the MCU. Captain Marvel was declared the strongest Avenger, a hero powerful enough to lead the next generation. But the rollout backfired. Instead of audiences rallying around a fresh face, Larson's interviews turned into viral clips that painted her as dismissive toward fans, especially older male viewers who had supported Marvel from the start. Headlines exaggerated every soundbite, and social media turned her into a symbol of Marvel's woke shift. By the time Captain Marvel hit theaters, audiences already felt divided. The film made money, but the cultural conversation around Brie overshadowed the movie itself. When The Marvels released years later, the fatigue was overwhelming. Despite being part of the biggest franchise in cinema history, the film collapsed at the box office and earned the label of the lowest-grossing MCU entry ever. What should have been Marvel's future-proofing move became the turning point where audiences started walking away. Brie Larson wasn't just in the movie. She became the lightning rod blamed for Marvel's downward spiral. Emilia Clarke, Terminator, Genesis. After Game of Thrones made Emilia Clarke a household name, Hollywood positioned her as the perfect star to rejuvenate Terminator. Cast as Sarah Connor in Genesis, Clarke was meant to carry the franchise into a new trilogy. But the movie immediately collapsed under the weight of its convoluted script. By rewriting the timeline, it erased the emotional stakes that made the original films so powerful. Sarah Connor, once a hardened survivor, was reduced to a hollow version of herself. Clarke did her best, but she later admitted the production was miserable, and audiences could see her lack of enthusiasm on screen. The movie bombed, and plans for sequels were scrapped. Instead of being the savior of the franchise, Clarke's entry is remembered as the film that finally broke Terminator beyond repair. The franchise didn't collapse overnight, but Cypher marked the beginning of its slide into fatigue. The focus moved further away from street racing toward generic spy thriller tropes, leaving many longtime fans nostalgic for the days when the series was simpler and more fun. By 2025, even die-hard fans admit the franchise peaked years ago, and Theron's arrival is often cited as the turning point. Melissa McCarthy, Ghostbusters 2016. The 2016 reboot of Ghostbusters was meant to relaunch a classic comedy franchise for a new generation. With Melissa McCarthy leading a cast of respected comedians, the project looked promising on paper. But instead of recapturing the dry, deadpan humor of the originals, the movie leaned into McCarthy's trademark style: loud, exaggerated slapstick, constant improvisation, and physical gags. The tonal mismatch was glaring. Fans who grew up with Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd's understated delivery now faced a version that felt like a Saturday Night Live sketch stretched to 2 hours. From the very first trailers, backlash brewed. Instead of addressing concerns about tone and storytelling, Sony reframed criticism as sexism. Cast members, including McCarthy, expressed frustration with the online pushback. The narrative shifted away from whether the movie was good to whether audiences were allowed to dislike it. By the time it released, the controversy had consumed the film. Ghostbusters 2016 underperformed financially, leaving Sony embarrassed and forcing the brand to backpedal with Ghostbusters Afterlife, a film marketed explicitly as a return to the real Ghostbusters. McCarthy wasn't solely to blame, but she became the symbol of a reboot gone wrong. Elizabeth Banks, Charlie's Angels director, Chalk star. If Stewart was the face of the 2019 reboot, Elizabeth Banks was its architect. She wasn't just acting in the movie. She wrote, produced, and directed it. The vision was clear: turn the Angels into a symbol of empowerment for modern audiences, reframing them as feminist icons for the post-Me Too era. But instead of letting the storytelling prove the point, Banks went on the offensive in press tours. She openly stated that if the film flopped, it would prove men don't support women in action roles. That framing made the movie feel less like entertainment and more like a referendum on gender politics. When the film did fail, Banks doubled down, blaming the audience instead of acknowledging creative missteps. What could have been remembered as a forgettable flop turned into a lightning rod of controversy. The movie didn't just disappear. It became shorthand for how Hollywood sometimes lectures audiences instead of entertaining them. By 2025, Charlie's Angels remains a case study in franchise mismanagement, with Banks' defensive posture ensuring its place in pop culture as a cautionary tale. Across these 9 stories, the pattern repeats itself. Actresses placed at the center of reboots or legacy sequels, burdened with scripts that misfire and marketing campaigns that put politics before storytelling. The actresses didn't ruin these franchises alone. They were set up to fail by studios chasing headlines instead of heart. Yet, when the dust settled, it was their faces on the posters, and their names tied forever to the downfall of billion-dollar brands. Hit that like button faster than Vin Diesel shifts gears, subscribe before Disney casts me as the next Iron Man, and drop your picks in the comments. Who ruined a franchise worse than Hollywood ruined its own reputation?